Okay, I'm going to start class this morning by just officially welcoming all of you guys. Sawadee Krap. Sawadee Krap. Welcome. Ni hao to all of you guys. Nice to see you here this morning. This is what we call our Pali Canon in English study group, where we study the original words of the Buddha in order to help students to understand what he taught in order to help you get to enlightenment. What enlightenment is where the mind's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. You no longer experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety. You don't experience loneliness or boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of these have been uprooted and eliminated from the mind by training the mind. So meditation is an important aspect of training the mind to get to enlightenment. So I start each one of our classes with meditation to help you guys learn meditation and practice meditation. And then afterwards, we'll transition over to studying the original teachings of the Buddha. And I'll show you guys how we do that when we get to that point. If you'd like to join for meditation, we start with some chanting to ease the mind into meditation. And I see somebody handed out the chanting sheets. We have these available for students here. The chanting is done in the Pali language. This is the original source language of the teachings of the Buddha. If you go back to his original teachings, it's in what's called the Pali language. Nowadays, they've been translated over to other languages, but during his lifetime, nothing was written down during his life, so they would chant in order to commit the teachings to memory. So every 2 weeks, they would come together and they would recite his teachings word for word for word, because everything was oral during his lifetime. They didn't write anything down. It wasn't until after he died that they ended up writing his teachings down. So today we still chant, and I do this in order to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation. But it's important to understand that these chants, they're not a rite or ritual or a ceremony or worship. There's nothing mystical or magical that is occurring with these chants. It's just to ease the mind into meditation. And if you read the English translations, you can see there's a lot of respect and gratitude and admiration for the Buddha. And I suspect that his students created these chants either during his life or after his death, because a Buddha wouldn't go around teaching people to chant to them. They would have eliminated their ego. They wouldn't be arrogant and boastful and prideful. They would be humble. So he wouldn't have taught people to chant these things to him. But instead, if you learn from a teacher how to move from all the anger and sadness and frustration and all those other discontent feelings to the peace and joy of the enlightened mind, you would probably have a lot of respect and gratitude for that person too. So this is where I suspect that these particular chants came from. After the chanting, I'm going to provide you some guidance while we're actually meditating. We'll be in meditation and I'll be providing the guidance for you. Then there'll be a period of time where it'll just be quiet and we'll just be meditating together. I'm sure you're going to hear the occasional bird chirping or maybe a dog barking or maybe a car going by or something like this. But these sounds are all impermanent. You'll be able to just let that go and bring your mind back to the breath. And then after we're meditating together, then we'll come out of the meditation with some chanting. In terms of the meditation positions, there's 4 positions that the Buddha taught: seated, lying, standing, and walking positions. So in the seated position is what most people will be learning in when they first get started, either sitting on the floor or sitting in a chair. This is very common for people to sit in order to meditate as they're first getting started. But then ultimately you would like to develop these other positions in order to help you in your meditation practice, because you're not going to be able to permanently be in one specific position. But just I'll give you a little bit of guidance of the sitting position. Is if you're on the floor, you usually would like to have a cushion under your rear. Some people like to put their legs off the mat in order to get their hips up in the air, and this lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, and allows the circulation to flow more readily. If you're crossing your legs, you just like them to be lightly crossed so that you don't inhibit the circulation. The hands and the arms, the Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. And you could do this if you like, but this practice isn't about everybody doing it exactly the same way, because this isn't possible. There's other options for you as well. You might find it more comfortable to put your palms on your thighs or on your knees, put your palms up, maybe rest your hands in your lap. It's really up to you, wherever you find it to be comfortable. The lower body and the hands and arms should be nice and comfortable. If someone's sitting in a chair, they might just put their feet flat on the floor or cross at the ankles just lightly, and then again with the hands and arms resting comfortably wherever you find it to be comfortable. The upper body should be erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. It also helps to open up the lungs so that you can actually breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So with your sternum up and your shoulders back, this will keep the mind attentive and alert so you can actively train the mind during meditation. So again, I'd like to welcome all of you guys here, everyone online that's joining us. Welcome to our class. If you'd like to join for meditation, you can join with the chanting too if you like. I'm going to ease us into meditation with chanting, and then I'll be back with some guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddha Mahakeva Wat Tung Mahakevanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakevata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakevato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakeva Arahang Samma Sambuddha Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, in the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Wat Tung Mahakawanang Apiwateyami Savakato Mahakawata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Poto Bhagavate. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, I welcome everyone here, and those of you guys online, welcome. Nice to see all of you guys here, including those of you guys that joined us since we started meditating. Welcome to Wat Tung. Welcome to the Pali Canon and English Study Group. Today, we're actually starting a new book in our journey on this program. This program that I'm teaching on Saturdays, what we do is we cover volumes 2 through 13 of this book series that I share. This is where you're studying the original words of the Buddha to be able to understand the path to enlightenment, where you're learning teachings, you're reflecting on those teachings to independently verify them, and then you're practicing them in order to transform your mind, moving the mind to this enlightened mental state where it's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. This meditation that we did is called breathing mindfulness meditation. This is a primary form of training that we use in addition to other things in order to train the mind to get to this enlightened mental state. Because all the discontent feelings that you experience, whether it's anger, sadness, frustration, or any of these others that I talk about, it's all being caused by your own mind. There's certain pollutions or taints or defilements that are in the mind that are causing the mind to experience these feelings. And the Buddha discovered what these are, and then he discovered how to use various tools and techniques to eliminate them and eradicate them from the mind so that you can experience this peace and this joy. So by learning these teachings from the Buddha, not believing them, you don't believe a bunch of teachings and then hope something good happens when you die. Instead, you're learning now, you're reflecting now in the present moment, and you're practicing now in order to transform your mind. And this is where you see the results now in this life. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to transition over to studying the Pali Canon and English Study Group, and I'll explain to you guys the way that this works. Is what we do is I show a chapter of the teachings of the Buddha through here, and let me switch over online so the folks online can see this as well. And what I do is I ask for a volunteer from the temple or from anybody who's in Zoom that would like to read this particular chapter. And then once you read the chapter, I will share some teachings on that. 1 second, I'm having a little bit of technical things here. Okay, there we go. It's back. Okay, so like I was saying, what I do is I share the teachings of the Buddha in this particular program through having a student here at the temple or someone on Zoom to volunteer to read a particular chapter. And these chapters are actually quite short. This one you can see is about a page and a quarter. And after somebody reads the chapter, then I will share some teachings on that particular chapter, and then I will open up to any and all questions that you have. This is more of a study group, where other programs that I teach, it's more of a traditional style of learning where you're learning for maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then I open up for questions, and I teach for another 15, 20, 30 minutes and open up for questions. This is our foundational programs that I do that in. But in this program, this is where students will oftentimes have already established a foundation in the teachings of the Buddha, and they're coming into this program in order to kind of fill in the framework. So today we're starting a new book. It's volume 12. It's titled Lowly Arts. Here you're going to learn various things that the Buddha did not practice. This is where you can understand really truly what the Buddha did during his life and what he actually practiced, because everything that he taught is all about cultivating wisdom in the mind. Sometimes nowadays, if you go into various venues, you might see rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship being practiced around things that are being described as Buddhist. But here, these chapters in this particular book, you're going to see where he didn't teach any of those things. And he advised his students, namely the ordained practitioners, not to do certain things that would promote what we call wrong view, which is rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship isn't actually training your mind. It's not helping you to cultivate wisdom. So here you're going to learn a bunch of things related to the things that the Buddha didn't do and the things that he didn't teach in this particular book. So if there's someone here at the temple or someone that is in Zoom that would like to volunteer to read this chapter, that would be wonderful. For those of you guys here at the temple, we have microphones in the white bowl that if you could get a microphone, we have plenty of microphones. If you get one, you can just keep it with you so that if you need it again or if the people around you need it, you can use it. The way that you use it is you press the gray button and then you'll see the lights come on. You just wait a second or two and hold it up to your chin. Then we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll also be able to hear you online as well. And for those of you guys in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and then open up your microphone, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple. So is there someone who would like to volunteer to read this particular chapter? Everybody shy today? Okay, yeah, Robert, Rachel, sure, please.
What are the lowly arts? Venerable Sir, whereas some ascetics and Brahmins feed on the food of the dedicated, make their living by such base arts, such wrong means of livelihood as palmistry, divining by signs, portents, dreams, body marks, mouse gnawings, fire oblations, oblations from a ladle, of husks, rice powder, rice grains, ghee or oil, from the mouth or of blood, reading the fingertips, house and garden lore, skill and charms, ghost lore, earth house lore, snake lore, poison lore, rat lore, bird lore, crow lore, foretelling a person's lifespan, charms against arrows, knowledge of animals' cries. Whereas some aesthetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as judging the marks of gems, sticks, clothes, swords, spears, arrows, weapons, women, men, boys, girls, male and female slaves, elephants, horses, buffaloes, bulls, cows, goats, rams, cocks, quail, iguanas, bamboo rats, tortoises, deer. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as predicting, the chiefs will march out, the chiefs will march back, our chiefs will advance, and the other chiefs will retreat. Our chiefs will win, and the other chiefs will lose. The other chiefs will win, and ours will lose. Thus, there will be victory for one side and defeat for the other. Whereas some aesthetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as predicting an eclipse of the moon, the sun, a star, that the sun and moon will go on their proper course, will go astray, that a star will go on its proper course, will go astray, that there will be a shower of meteors, a blaze in the sky, an earthquake, thunder, a rising, setting, darkening, brightening of the moon, the sun, the stars, and such will be the outcome of these things. Whereas some aesthetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as predicting good or bad rainfall, a good or bad harvest, security, danger, disease, health, or accounting, computing, calculating, poetic composition, philosophizing. Whereas some aesthetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as arranging the giving and taking in marriage, engagement and divorces, declaring the time for saving and spending, bringing good or bad luck, procuring abortions, using spells to bind the tongue, binding the jaw, making the hands jerk, causing deafness, getting answers with a mirror, a girl, medium, a heavenly being, worshiping the sun or great Brahma, God, breathing fire, invoking the goddess of luck. Whereas some aesthetics and Brahmins, feeding on the food of the dedicated, making their living by such base arts, such wrong means of livelihood as appeasing the heavenly beings and redeeming vows to them, making earth house spells, causing virility or impotence, preparing and consecrating building sites, giving ritual rinsings and bathings, making sacrifices, giving emetics, purges, expectorants, and phlemogogues, giving ear, eye, nose medicine, ointments and counter ointments, eye surgery, podiatry, using balms to counter the side effects of previous remedies.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So here, this is just the first chapter of this particular book where it's describing what are the lowly arts. What you've got here in these books is you've got excerpts from the longer discourses of the Buddha. The Teachings of the Buddha are in 45 large volumes of books, and this is referred to as the Pali Canon. And these discourses are oftentimes very long, and some people find it very challenging because there's so many different topics that the Buddha is discussing in any one particular discourse. So what this book series does is it creates an extract where in one particular chapter you can glean certain golden nuggets about the teachings of the Buddha that will help you on your journey to enlightenment. In this particular book titled The Lowly Arts, what he's going to be talking about in all these different discourses that have been consolidated into this book are certain things that people were doing during his lifetime that are unwise because it promotes what we refer to as wrong view. What right view is where you understand your mind is causing your own discontentedness, and you see that it's craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning that's producing that. And then you start to understand what's called the natural law of Gama, or some people refer to it as karma. This word Gama is the Pali word, and what this is referring to is this cause and effect, or this action and result. That everything you experience in life, there's some decision that you make, and then there's a result that it comes with that decision. And if you make a decision that's wise, you're going to experience a wholesome results in your life. And when you make a decision that's unwise, you're going to experience unwholesome results in your life. Sometimes people think that what they experience in life is either good luck or bad luck, or maybe it's destiny or it's fate or these kinds of things, but this isn't actually true. What you're experiencing in your life is cause and effect, or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. But in the unenlightened state, the mind is unawake to this natural law of Gama, so it doesn't always see that to be the case. It oftentimes will blame what you experience in life. If it's unwholesome, it'll blame it on somebody else. And what these things that the Buddha is talking about here with lowly arts is that they actually promote wrong view. They promote the view that you can somehow produce beneficial results in your life by doing these types of things like this. So here we're going to end up continuing in the next chapter, where the Buddha ultimately gets to the point where he says he doesn't do these things. There's nothing auspicious or mystical or magical or superstitious about the teachings of the Buddha. Sometimes people try to attribute those kinds of things to the teachings of the Buddha, but that's not actually what the Buddha taught. He taught to awaken to the wisdom of this natural law, where you can see this cause and effect, or action and result. And now with that wisdom, you'll make wiser decisions in your life that will produce more wholesome results. But if the mind didn't understand that what you were experiencing is a result of your decision, and it's something external that's creating the results that you experience, you might think doing some of these things will actually somehow improve what you're experiencing in life. And this just isn't possible to do any of these kinds of things or others in order to improve your life. The way that you need to improve your life is to cultivate wisdom, make wiser decisions, and then you'll experience more wholesome results. And that's what all the teachings of the Buddha are about. But it's very challenging to make wise decisions when your mind has certain pollutions. And the Buddha teaches those in the foundational teachings. He explains to you what those pollutions are in your mind that are hindering you from being able to see true reality and to be able to see how to make wise decisions. And because of those pollutions, the mind then makes unwise decisions that produces unwholesome results. And because the mind lacks wisdom to understand that it is making these decisions and then experiencing these certain results, it will typically blame whatever you experience as unwholesome on other people, or it might turn to some of these things like fortune telling and some of these other things to be able to somehow make improvement in your life. So here, this first chapter is just setting up what are the lowly arts, and that's what the Buddha is describing. But here in a moment, you're going to see him describing these some more, and he's going to say he doesn't do these things. And the reason why is because it promotes wrong view, that if he did these type of things where he was doing fortune telling and all these other things, people would think that somehow what you should be doing is being worried about the future, where in reality you should be in the present moment, looking at whatever you're experiencing in the present moment and making wise decisions in the present moment. All these other things that he's describing aren't actually going to lead to wholesome results in your life. So do you guys have any questions here on what I've shared so far in this first chapter? For those of you guys on Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can put your questions into the comment section, and I'll be able to see that and answer your question. In Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like. Those of you guys here at the temple, if you could use the microphones, that would be great, because then we'll hear you here at the temple and they'll hear you online as well. And as I mentioned, once you get a microphone, if you'd like to keep it with you, you're more than welcome, because you might need it again, or someone around you might need it as well. Rex, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Why doesn't the Buddha include lowly arts in the right livelihood section, where he talks about the 5 things you should not practice?
So the 5 trades not to be plied is what we call that one. That is for all practitioners, but namely household practitioners, because they're the ones who are doing business. You see there where he says business in weapons, business in living beings, business in meat, business and substances that cause heedlessness and business and poisons. But then when he teaches the ordained practitioners, he has livelihoods that are beyond that. You'll see that he talks about other livelihoods that ascetics were practicing during his time. There were other people who, during the lifetime of the Buddha, they were claiming that it was their teachings that lead to enlightenment, and they weren't necessarily giving up their career and their home life and going into homelessness the way that he did. Some of those people were still working and trying to kind of straddle this line of working and living this aesthetic life. So they would be doing these kinds of things for money. And what he's establishing here in this series of discourses that you're going to be learning is that, hey, if you're an ordained practitioner, it would be unwise to do any of these things because you're basing your livelihood on things that are promoting wrong view. And what he was teaching was for the ordained practitioners to establish right view for themselves, but then to be able to help other people establish right view as well. And if you're doing these kinds of things in order to sustain your life as a ordained practitioner, then you're promoting wrong view. So these kinds of things here that you're about to read in volume 12, it's mainly targeted towards the ordained practitioners. This isn't for, it's coming. It's almost there. So this book, The Lowly Arts, is mainly directed towards the ordained practitioners. Here, whether a household practitioner does these things or not, or even whether an ordained practitioner does these things or not, it's up to them. It's their choice. It's their life. It's their decisions. But the Buddha is teaching how to get to enlightenment. And if somebody was interested in getting to enlightenment and they understand how important it is for them to establish right view, the last thing they would be interested in is doing something that would be promoting wrong view, because this would be leading people down a path of discontentedness, or if we would like to use the word suffering, because the more people believe that the problem is external and we can fix that problem through rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, or any of these other things that he's talking about, then the mind doesn't gain the understanding and wisdom of what it really needs to eradicate those feelings. So you'll see most of these are directed towards the ordained practitioner, but even as a household practitioner, it would be unwise to do any of these things that you see here. Okay, let me see if we have any questions online here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions online anywhere. So let's move to the next chapter, which is chapter 2. Is there someone who would like to read this chapter? Robert, you had your hand up earlier. Would you like to go ahead? Yeah? We're willing to read chapter 1, but not chapter 2, right? By the way, while Robert's getting his microphone sorted out, for those of you guys here at the temple, there's a bathroom in the back of the room, the very last door on the right. You're welcome to use that at any time. There's even a bathroom outside the classroom. There's signs that you can take you around to the main temple bathroom. And we even have water here that's provided by our students that you're welcome to help yourself to. And I've even seen some snacks starting to show up, so you're welcome to help yourself to all of those things over there. Go ahead, Robert.
All right. The ascetic Gotama refrains from such base arts. Monks, whereas some ascetics and Brahmins feeding on the food from the dedicated make their living by such base arts, such wrong means of livelihood as palmistry, divining by signs, portents, dreams, body marks, mouse gnawings, fire oblations, oblations from a ladle, of husks, rice powder, rice grains, ghee or oil, from the mouth or of blood, reading the fingertips, house and garden lore, skill in charms, ghost lore, earth house lore, snake lore, poison lore, rat lore, bird lore, crow lore, foretelling a person's lifespan, charms against arrows, knowledge of animals' cries. The ascetic Gotama refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood. Thus, the worldling would praise the Tathagata, whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as judging the marks of gems, sticks, clothes, swords, spears, arrows, weapons, women, men, boys, girls, male and female slaves. elephants, horses, buffaloes, bulls, cows, goats, rams, cocks, quail, iguanas, bamboo rats, tortoise, deer. The ascetic Gotama refrains from such base arts. Thus the worldling would praise the Tathagata. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as predicting, the chiefs will march out, the chiefs will march back, our chiefs will advance, and the other chiefs will retreat. Our chiefs will win, and the other chiefs will lose. The other chiefs will win, and ours will lose. Thus there will be victory for one side and defeat for the other. The ascetic Gotama refrains from such base arts. Thus the worldling would praise the Tathagata. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as predicting an eclipse of the moon, the sun, a star, that the sun and the moon will go on their proper course, will go astray, that a star will go on its proper course, will go astray, that there will be a shower of meteors, a blaze in the sky, an earthquake, thunder, a rising, setting, darkening, brightening of the moon, the sun, the stars, and such will be the outcome of these things. The ascetic Gotama refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood. Thus the worldling would praise the Tathagata. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as predicting good and bad rainfall, a good or bad harvest, security, danger, disease, health, or accounting, computing, calculating, poetic composition, philosophizing, the ascetic Gotama refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood. Thus the worldling would praise the Tathagata. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as arranging the giving and taking in marriage, engagements and divorces, declaring the time for saving and spending, bringing good or bad luck, procuring abortions, using spells to bind the tongue, binding the jaw, making the hands jerk, causing deafness, getting answers with a mirror, a girl medium, a heavenly being, worshipping the sun or great Brahma, breathing fire, invoking the goddess of luck, the ascetic Gotama refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood. Thus the worldling would praise the Tathagata. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins feeding on the food of the dedicated make their living by such base arts, such wrong means of livelihood as appeasing the heavenly beings and redeeming vows to them, making earth house spells, causing virility or impotence, preparing and consecrating building sites, giving ritual rinsings and bathings, making sacrifices, giving emetics, purges, expectorants, and phlegmagogues, giving ear, eye, nose medicine, ointments and counter-ointments, eye surgery, podiatry, using balms to counter the side effects of previous remedies. The ascetic Gotama refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood. Thus the worldling would praise the Tathagata. It is, monks, for such base minor matters that of moral practice that the worldling would praise the Tathagata.
Okay, thank you, sir. So here, what we've got is we've got a bunch of things that the Buddha's sharing that he doesn't actually practice. And the reason why is because in some cases it's leading to wrong view, but in other cases it's basing his livelihood on certain things that he's not interested in basing his livelihood on. Because here, what he's sharing is he's saying, ascetics and Brahmin feeding on the food of the dedicated. What he means here is he's walking around and his students are walking around and other people are walking around down the street receiving donations of food from the household practitioners to be able to then get deeper and deeper into their practice of learning and understanding the teachings that it takes to get to enlightenment. Essentially, the household practitioners are providing resources to be able to create this womb for individuals to move within and then actually develop their mind and get to enlightenment. If you think about the womb of a woman being the perfect environment in which to grow and develop into a human being, the monastery or ordaining is that perfect environment. You can get to enlightenment in a household environment, but if you're ordaining, as the Buddha is describing here, talking to the ordained practitioners, you're entering into this womb to be able to develop into a better and better human being. So if you're feeding on the food of the dedicated, meaning you're accepting these donations from people, the way that the Buddha set up his teachings is that there's this mutual support, that if you're receiving these donations, that the way that you repay that is through sharing teachings back with the community who's sharing resources with you. So if you were to take this food from people and eat this free food essentially, and then as an ordained practitioner now go off and do any of these types of livelihood, whether it's promoting wrong view or any other type of livelihood, then you're actually getting this free food, but you're not giving anything back to the household practitioners. So he taught that there's this mutual support and this exchange where household practitioners are providing support to a teacher, and then the teacher is providing support back to the students by sharing teachings with them. So while some of these things here that the Buddha is talking about do promote wrong view, some of them don't. Like where he was talking about surgery and podiatry and things like that, a household practitioner is going to perform those kinds of things, right? Like it can be wise to have that type of knowledge in a community. But if you're eating the food of the dedicated, which is what the Buddha is prefacing every single one of these with, then your role at that point is being an ordained practitioner to get to enlightenment and develop your own mind and cultivate as much wisdom as possible. And now when you cultivate that wisdom, you share it back with the community by helping them to learn what it takes for them to get to enlightenment. And this is the mutual support and the exchange that he created during his lifetime. So here he's sharing with the ordained practitioners all the various things that he doesn't do as a livelihood. What he did was he shared the teachings that it took to get to enlightenment. From the age of 35 to the age of 80, that's when he got to enlightenment, was at the age of 35. So for 45 years, up until the age of 80, he shared the teachings. And he was accepting donations of food, clothing, shelter, and medical care in order to help sustain his life. But then he gave back to his students these teachings that would help them improve the condition of their mind and the condition of their life by learning and practicing and developing their mind. And that's how he ended up supporting himself to be able to then share the teachings. Prior to that, he was a prince. He was destined to become a king, and he walked away from those royal riches in order to get to enlightenment. And once he got to enlightenment, he discovered how to do that. He then dedicated the rest of his life to sharing these teachings to be able to help others. And now he's establishing, this is what I don't do. Instead, what you can understand that the Buddha did do is share the teachings to help people get to enlightenment. And during his lifetime, countless people got to enlightenment. So here you can see that he's referring to himself as ascetic Gotama. This basically means monk Gotama. His name was Siddhartha Gotama. Gotama was his last name. So oftentimes people would refer to him as ascetic Gotama or monk Gotama or master teacher Gotama. He often referred to himself also as the Tathagata. This means the one who shares the truth or the one who's discovered the truth. And here, when he's refraining to this worldling, what he's talking about is somebody who's holding on to the world. He's saying somebody who's holding on to the world would potentially praise him for choosing not to do these particular activities in terms of supporting himself in his livelihood. So do you guys have any questions on this chapter? No questions here? Okay, so let's go to chapter number 3. By the way, what you have here is you have the words of the Buddha in each of these books. You have the reference, which goes back to the original Pali Canon, so you can see what the Buddha was talking about either before this or after this. And you can even see these reflections, which is what I'm sharing, to be able to help you understand how to implement these teachings into your life. And all of these books, they're available at no cost. You can download them from our website. You can take them and go print them. You can get printed versions here at the temple. Or if you have access to Amazon in your country, you can order them on Amazon. So these are available for you at no cost if you would like to download this entire book series and learn from it. I would suggest starting with volume 1. That's the best place to start and really build a foundation. But here we're in volume 12 because this program is a 1.5-year program, and it's been going on for quite a while now. We're getting to the end of this program, and then we'll restart it from the very beginning. So oftentimes by the time somebody gets to this book, they would have already studied a lot of other teachings before they actually encounter these. But this is the way that all these books are actually structured. Okay, so let me now go to chapter 3. Is there someone who would like to read this? Nobody would like to read? Oh, Koshi, okay.
A monk who is perfected in morality, a monk refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood. Venerable Sir, whereas some ascetics and Brahmins, feeding on the food of the dedicated, make their living by such base arts, such wrong means of livelihood as palmistry, divining by signs, portents, dreams, body marks, mouse gnawings, fire oblations from a lathe of husk, rice powder, rice grains, ghee or oil, from the mouth or of blood, reading the fingertips, house and garden lore, skill in charms, ghost lore, earth house lore, snake lore, poison lore, rat lore, bird lore, crow lore, foretelling a person's lifespan, charms against arrows, knowledge of animals' cries. A monk refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood, thus he is perfected in morality. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as judging the marks of gems, sticks, clothes, swords, spears, arrows, weapons, women, men, boys, girls, male and female slaves, elephants, horses, buffaloes, bulls, cows, goats, rams, cocks, quail, iguanas, bamboo rat, tortoises, deer, a monk refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood. Thus he is perfected in morality. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as predicting, the chiefs will march out, the chiefs will march back, our chiefs will advance and other chiefs will retreat, our chiefs will win and other chiefs will lose, the other chiefs will win and our will lose. And thus there will be a victory from one side and defeat for the other. A monk refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood. Thus he is perfected in morality. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as predicting an eclipse of moon, the sun, the star, and that the sun and moon will go on their proper course, will go astray, that a star will go on its proper course, will go astray, that there will be a shower of meteors, a blaze in the sky, an earthquake, thunder, arising, setting, darkening, brightening of the moon, the sun, the stars, and such will be the outcome of these things. A monk refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood, thus he is perfected in morality. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as predicting good or bad rainfall, a good or bad harvest, security, danger, disease, health, or accounting, computing, calculating, poetic composition, philosophizing. A monk refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood, thus he is perfected in morality. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as arranging the giving and taking in marriage, engagements and divorces, declaring the time for saving and spending, bringing good or bad luck, procuring abortions, using spells to bind the tongue, binding the jaw, making the hands shake, causing the deafness, getting answers with a mirror, a girl medium, a heavenly being, worshipping the sun or great Brahma, God, breathing fire, invoking the goodness of luck. A monk refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood, thus he is perfected in morality. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins, feeding on the food of the dedicated, make their living by such base arts, such wrong means of livelihood as appeasing the heavenly beings and redeeming vows to them, making earth house spells, causing virality or impotence, preparing and consecrating, building sites, giving ritual risings and bathings, making sacrifices, giving ementics, purges, expectorants, and giving ear, eye, nose, medicine, ointments and counter ointments, eye surgery, pediatry, using balms to counter the side effects of previous remedies. A monk refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood, thus he is perfected in morality. And then, sir, that monk who is perfected in morality sees no danger from any side owing to his being restrained by morality, just as a duly anointed Katya king, having conquered his enemies, by that very fact sees no danger from any side. So the monk, on account of his morality, sees no danger anywhere. He experiences in himself the blameless bliss that comes from maintaining this noble morality. In this way, sir, he is perfected in morality.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So the Buddha, all throughout his life, when he's sharing teachings, he's helping people see this cause and effect that I was talking about, that action and result, the natural law of karma. And what he's helping his ordained practitioners see here is that, hey, by you practicing in this way, this is what's going to produce the best results for you. Because if you're sharing his teachings as an ordained practitioner, helping people to be able to see this cause and effect, this natural law of karma, but yet you are doing these kinds of things, what you're choosing to do as a livelihood is in conflict with the teachings that you're choosing to share. And it would be very difficult for you to be able to sustain your life if what you're sharing is in conflict versus what you're actually practicing as an individual. So here at the very end, you can see the Buddha saying, hey, if you practice in this way, then this will ensure that you don't meet with any danger. So in other words, unwholesome results. So all throughout his teaching, he was sharing this cause and effect or action and result so individuals could see this natural law of karma for themselves. And here he's showing things that, hey, these would be in conflict. If you were sharing my teachings as an ordained practitioner and you were to do these things, you would be practicing something that would be in conflict with what it is you're actually sharing as a life practice to help people get to enlightenment. So any questions here on this chapter? Okay, so let's go to the next one, which is chapter 4. There's someone who would like to read this one? Very short one.
Check. The various kinds of pointless talk. Monks do not engage in the various kinds of pointless talk, that is, talk about kings, thieves, and ministers of state, talk about armies, dangers, and wars, talk about food, drink, garments, and beds, talk about garlands and scents, talk about relations, vehicles, villages, towns, cities, and countries, talk about women and talk about heroes, street talk and talk by the well, talk about those departed in days gone by, rambling chit-chat, speculation about the world and about the sea, talk about becoming this or that. For what reason? Because monks, this talk is unbeneficial, irrelevant to the fundamentals of the holy life, and does not lead to fading away of strong feelings, to freedom from strong feelings, to elimination, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana.
Okay, thank you, sir. So here the Buddha is describing to his ordained practitioners what would be wise to talk about and what would be unwise, because these people were living off of the support and the generosity of people that were sharing with them. And if you were to be an ordained practitioner, your goal is to get to enlightenment yourself, so that more and more as you cultivate that wisdom, you would then be able to share that wisdom with others and help them be able to get to enlightenment too. But as an ordained practitioner, if you were talking about these kinds of things, you wouldn't be able to actually help people get to enlightenment. Because, for example, if you're talking to a large audience of people and you're talking essentially this first part he's talking about is politics, right? If you're talking about politics, half of the people are probably going to agree with you and half of the people are going to disagree with you. And that means the people who disagree with you, they're not going to be interested in learning with you. So he taught his ordained practitioners not to talk about things like politics and all these other topics here too, because it just creates conflict. It creates division among people, and it doesn't keep the focus of the conversation on what actually leads to enlightenment. These things don't actually lead to enlightenment. As a household practitioner, you may need to talk about these things from time to time with your various people in your life, various relationships. But as an ordained practitioner, as a teacher, we wouldn't talk about these kinds of things because it just creates division and it creates difficulties for a student to be able to then learn from a particular teacher. So these kinds of things, like the Buddha is describing here, doesn't promote the ability for you to understand the teachings of what it takes to get to enlightenment. So as a teacher, as an ordained practitioner, what the Buddha is guiding us to be able to talk about are the things that lead to the results of getting to enlightenment. That's what's going to help our students to be able to do that. But what you choose to talk about is up to you. The Buddha gives guidance on right speech, and you can study those teachings. They're part of the core fundamental teachings. But then you'll see other teachings plug into this. And you might decide to talk about politics, but you're going to need to do that without craving, desire, attachment. You might choose to talk about some of these other things. But again, you'll need to do that without craving, desire, attachment, so you don't have this bitterness and harshness and hostility or clinging to your opinions and views where you have these very heated conversations. Instead, you would like all your conversations to be at ease, where you're not being harsh and holding on to your opinions and views and, trying to advocate for somebody to agree with you on what it is that you're saying versus what they're saying. That's not what life's all about. It's not about going around the world and convincing other people to think of things in the same way as you. That wouldn't lead to enlightenment. So here he's talking to ordained practitioners about what would be wise and unwise to talk about, and he's encouraging them to talk about the teachings that lead to enlightenment, and that's what's going to help them, and that's going to help other people as well. So any questions here on this chapter? I'll just remind those of you guys online, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So let's move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 5. Is there someone who would like to read this? Anybody would like to practice their English? You would like to try? Okay, go ahead. Yeah, maybe you can hand her a mic. Yeah.
The ascetic Gotama refrained from the pointless talk, whereas some ascetics and Brahmins feeding on the food of the dedicated remain addicted to such distasteful conversation as about kings, chiefs, and ministers of state. Talk about armies, dangers, and wars. Talk about food, drink, garments, and beds. Talk about garland and scent. Talk about relations, vehicles, villages, towns, cities, and countries. Talk about women and talk about heroes. Straight talk and talk by the well. Talk about those departed in days gone by. Rambling chit-chat, speculation about the world and about the sea. Talk about becoming this and that. The ascetics Gotama refrained from such conversation. Thus, the worldling would praise the Tathagata.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. So this is very similar to the previous chapter. Here he's just saying, hey, I don't talk about these kinds of things, right? This is a way of, he's not giving people rules. He's not giving people commandments. He's not dictating to people what they should or shouldn't do. He's already gotten to this peaceful and joyful mental state on his own. And if people aspire to experience that same peaceful mental state, he's just explaining what he chooses to do and how he chooses to conduct his life. And if people choose to learn that and reflect on it and practice it, then that's what they choose. The Buddha didn't create a bunch of rules for everybody to follow. He's just sharing with you what did he do in order to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state and having a peaceful and joyful life. So if he were to talk about these kinds of things, his life wouldn't be very peaceful because he'd be in conversations and people would be holding on to their opinions and views about politics, for example, and they would get so heated and upset and angry and frustrated and bitter. And next thing you know, there's this big argument going on. And a Buddha, an enlightened being, isn't going to argue with somebody. somebody gets hostile and bitter and harsh, they're not going to engage in those kinds of conversations, right? They're just going to walk away from it. So here the Buddha is saying, this is what I do. This is how I conduct my life. And if somebody chooses to practice in that same way, then that's on them. He's not telling you what to do. He's not forcing you. He's not trying to convince you of what to do. He's just saying, this is what I choose to do. And that way, if you're around somebody who's enlightened, you can see that they're so peaceful, they're so joyful. And if you would like to experience that same mental state, then you can learn how to accomplish that for yourself, right? Whereas if you're talking about politics constantly and people are getting bitter and harsh and hostile around you, it'd be very challenging for you to get to a peaceful and joyful mind if there's all this hostility and bitterness and resentment and this arguing and this slander and this gossip constantly around you. You would like to create a life where you don't have those things around you. And the way that you do that is by you choosing not to do those things. Whereas if you chose to do those things, then the people around you are going to choose to do those things too. But by you changing the decisions that you make and improving the decisions that you make, you'll experience different results. So by you choosing to potentially not hold on to your views and opinions of politics or any other thing and talk adamantly and strongly and viciously, then you'll see that the people around you won't do that either. So any questions on this chapter? Yes, ma'am. If you could get a microphone, we could maybe pass one back to her. You got one? Perfect. Yeah, you can have a seat. Feel free to relax. She's got a microphone. Yeah.
Okay. I'm feeling that for girls and women, we talk to press our emotion. So if we don't talk, we will feel depressed. That's a way we use to share I'm happy and I'm not happy to other person. So we, if we feel bad, we talk to people and we come better. So is what we do is not fit this principle, not fitly this way.
Yeah, there's no harm in talking about your feelings and what you're experiencing on a day-to-day basis, particularly if you're talking with somebody that can actually help you, because that depression or sadness that you're talking about that you maybe experience from time to time, this is actually being caused by your own craving, desire, attachment. So if you're talking with somebody that can actually help you learn how to train your mind, you can get to a point where you no longer experience depression or sadness or any of these other discontent feelings. So there's no harm in talking about your feelings, because then you can be reaching out for help to be able to get help from somebody that can actually help you. And that's what the Buddha prepared his ordained practitioners to be able to do, is to be able to train their own mind and understand the wisdom of how to eliminate sadness and frustration and irritation. So if you're going to talk about these things, it's best to talk about them with anybody you like, of course, but talk about it with somebody who actually can help you to eliminate the causes and conditions that are producing those feelings, because then you can get to a real result. Whereas if you weren't talking with somebody that could actually help you, then you're just talking, about your feelings. You're not able to actually solve them and fix them. So ultimately, you would like to have people in your life that can help you to actually understand what's causing these feelings so that you can then eliminate them. And that's where the teachings of the Buddha come in to be able to help you.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Okay, looks like Rachel has a question. Go ahead, Rachel.
David, when I read these passages, these chapters, I have a feeling. It feels like the Buddha is saying, do not talk about life, because many topics are put aside, like food and drinks, like dangers, like relations, like becoming this or that, or I kind of think it's dreams or aspirations or future plans. It's like a huge number of topics are not recommended. What should we talk about? And also, as a Buddha or as ordained practitioners, they usually help people to better manage or better live their daily life. If these daily life topics are not suggested for talking or forbidden for talking, then what do we talk?
Yeah, so remember that he's talking to the ordained practitioners here about what would be wise for them to discuss, because he was interested in having them focus on learning the teachings and cultivating the wisdom of what it takes to get to enlightenment. This isn't about what a household practitioner may or may not consider to be wise to discuss. This is for ordained practitioners or even teachers like me. Like, you won't see me talking about kings and thieves and ministers of state. This is like politics, or, when he's talking about thieves, what he's talking about is people who are doing unwise things in the community, like maybe if there's a big court case in the public eye, you won't see me talking about that, because in that situation, there's going to be certain people that think this person's guilty. There's going to be certain people who think that they're not guilty. As soon as I take a side and I say, like, okay, I think this person's guilty or not guilty, half of the group is going to disagree with me, and therefore they're going to be like, oh, I can't learn with this guy because I disagree with him. This is what the unenlightened mind will typically do, is if somebody disagrees with you, you'll tend to push them to the side. So if a teacher, here he's talking to the ordained practitioners, if a teacher is interested in helping the widest audience possible, it would be unwise to talk about these kinds of things. As an individual who's functioning in the community, you might find that some of these things are unwise for you to talk about too. But just keep in mind that here he's talking to the ordained practitioners because he's helping them to be able to help a widest audience as possible. And if you're taking sides about politics or a public court case or something like this, or some of the other things that he's talking about here, that it would be unwise. So for example, like villages, towns, cities, and countries. Like if somebody as an ordained practitioner was talking about these things in either an agreeable way or a disagreeable way. So say somebody was talking about a particular country, right? Like Germany is this or Germany is that. Again, there's going to be some people who agree with that, some people who disagree with that. And as a teacher, you would be alienating part of your community of people who could otherwise learn with you and be able to get to enlightenment. But you may decide to talk about these things. This might be something that you choose to talk about, but this is geared towards those people who are sharing the teachings.
So these topics are okay for teachers and students. It's a topic between students can raise such topics or can ask such questions. But for teachers or the ordained practitioners, this is not a topic between ordained practitioners. Yeah, it's also not a topic for monk.
Yeah, it's not about what's okay or not okay, because that would be like there's rules or commandments or something like that. The Buddha is helping you to be able to see this natural law of karma, of cause and effect. And then with that wisdom, you can then make the decisions that are wise for you. So as a teacher, I can look at this and I can see, yeah, it would be very unwise for me to talk about any of these kinds of things that he's talking about here, because it would alienate certain members of the community that would be otherwise interested in learning these teachings to get to enlightenment. My goal as a teacher is to help as many people to enlightenment as possible, not to talk about these kinds of things. I don't even have opinions on these kinds of things anyway. So I just don't talk about them. But if I did talk about them, it would be very unwise, and I can see the truth in that. You need to look at your life and in the role that you fulfill. Like, let's just say you worked in an office. I know that you don't, but let's just say you work in an office and there's 100 employees there. And what the Buddha's talking about here is talk by the well, right? This is like going to the water cooler and gossiping and slandering and just talking about different things. You're going to be wasting your time at work, and you're not going to be dedicated to performing and producing the quality work that you need. So this would be unwise even for you, right? Or say that you were at lunch with 10 of your other coworkers and you were disparaging a country like France. Say you were talking negatively about France. This would be unwise for you, right? So you can look at some of these things, and if you're having challenges to see which things would be wise or unwise for you, or if you're having challenges of why the Buddha is saying that these things would be unwise, you can let me know and I will help you to be able to see for your particular life and kind of how you conduct yourself. And you can ask me, David, would this be wise or would this be unwise? And I'll be able to help you. But I wouldn't suggest that you take this fully the way it is and just be like, okay, this is what the Buddha is saying, so I am going to now do this. Because remember, he's talking to the ordained practitioners, and this may or may not apply to you. And you need to be able to look at it not as whether it's okay or not okay, but understand what is wise and what is unwise and understand the reason why. Because then when you understand the reason why, then you'll have that wisdom and you'll make wise choices for yourself. Okay, so it looks like you got all your questions answered there. All right, thank you, Rachel. Any other questions? Okay, so let's go on to the next one. This is chapter 6. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Let me see here. This is actually very similar to the one we just read, so we might not have to read this one. This is actually very similar. The Buddha is just explaining it in a little bit different way. He's essentially encouraging his ordained practitioners to talk about the path to enlightenment. That's their whole goal. You know, if you're living this life where people are donating food, clothing, shelter, medical care, and things like this, what you need to give back to them is the teachings to be able to help them on the path to enlightenment. So he's encouraging them to be able to talk about the path to enlightenment. Here he's pointing to the Four Noble Truths, which is the very first teaching that he taught, and that's what leads to development on the path to enlightenment, is understanding what's causing one's own discontentedness. So here, this is very similar to the previous chapter, so I don't think we need to read that one. Let's see what else we got here. 3 wonders, 3 kinds of wonders. We could read this one. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Go ahead, Hoshi.
3 kinds of wonders. First discourse. There are Brahman, these 3 kinds of wonders. What 3? 1. The mystic wonder. 2. The wonder of mind reading. And 3. The wonder of instruction. 1. And what Brahman is the mystic wonder? Here a monk wields the various kinds of mystic potency. Having been one, he becomes many. Having been many, he becomes one. He appears and vanishes. He goes unhindered through a wall, through a protective barrier, through a mountain, as though through space. He dives in and out of the earth as though it were water. He walks on water without sinking, as though it were earth. Seated cross-legged, he travels in space like a bird. With his hands he touches and strokes the moon and sun so powerful and mighty. He exercises mastery with the body as far as the Brahma world. This is called the mystic wonder. 2. And what Brahman is the wonder of mind reading? There is one who, by means of some clue, declares, your thought is thus, such is what you are thinking. Your mind is such and such a state. And even if he makes many declarations, they are exactly so and not otherwise. Again, someone does not declare the state of mind on the basis of a clue, but he hears the sound of people, spirits, and deities speaking and then declares, your thought is thus, such is what you are thinking. Your mind is in this state and such a state. And even if he makes many declarations, they are exactly so and not otherwise. Again, someone does not declare the state of mind on the basis of a mark or by hearing the sound of people, spirits or deity speaking, but he hears the sound of the diffusion of thought as one is thinking and examining some matter, and then declares, your thought is thus, such is what you are thinking. Your mind is in such and such state. And even if he makes many declarations, they are exactly so and not otherwise. Again, someone does not declare the state of mind on the basis of a mark or by hearing the sound of people, spirits, or deities speaking, or by hearing the sound of diffusion of thought as one is thinking and examining some matter. But with his own mind he encompasses the mind of one who has attained concentration without thought and examination, and he understands. The person's mental activities are so disposed that immediately afterward he will think this thought. And even if he makes many declarations, they are exactly so and not otherwise. This is called the wonder of mind reading. And what Brahman is the wonder of instruction? Here someone instructs others thus: think in this way and not in that way. Attend to this and not that. Abandon this and enter and dwell in that. This is called the wonder of instruction.
Okay, thank you, Kushi. So here the Buddha is talking about three things that is possible for somebody to experience. And as your mind is awakening more and more, you may actually experience some of these things. Here he's talking, this first one is kind of like a supernatural type of ability that can potentially occur. That's what he's describing. The second one is mind reading, where actually you can get to the point where you can actually read somebody else's mind. This is what some people experience in the unenlightened state, but then as your mind's becoming more and more pure, you might actually notice this, where you can know other people's thoughts without them telling you what they are. Eventually, what you're going to see in the Buddha's discourses is he's sharing that he doesn't practice these things, even though his mind is capable of doing these things, because as a fully perfectly enlightened Buddha, you can definitely read the mind of other people, but it's not something you should cling to. It's not wise to do that. So ultimately what he's going to get to in other discourses is this wonder of instruction. And he says, this is what I essentially practice, that I'm able to share teachings with people and educate them and help them see these natural laws. And this is what I choose to do. Even though he's capable of doing these other things, he chooses to practice this miracle of education, or this wonder of instruction, being able to help people to understand the path to enlightenment. And a fully perfectly enlightened Buddha would be very wise and very helpful to be able to accomplish that. So here he's just explaining what these three things are, but you'll see other discourses where he shares that he doesn't perform those other two, but he performs this one, which is the wonder of instruction. So any questions on this? Okay, so let's go to the next one, which is chapter 8. And this is very similar. This is the second discourse. So very similar, all the similar things, just describing a little bit differently here. And now what he's talking about is he's just talking about how it's unwise to perform this wonder of this mystic wonder, this kind of supernatural thing. And he's explaining the reason why it's unwise to perform that. Then here, the second one, he's talking about the mind reading. And once again, he's explaining that he doesn't actually perform this, and he's explaining the reason why. And then he's talking about the wonder of an instruction. And this is where he's describing that, okay, this is what I actually teach, helping people to understand how to get to enlightenment. And that's what I choose to teach and perform. And then he goes into talking about wholesome conduct, because the decisions that you make around your moral conduct is going to determine what you experience in life. So he teaches about moral conduct all throughout his teachings. Okay, so I just kind of summarized that one for you guys, because while there's extra content here, you can read this and you can read the reflections from me to be able to help you understand this. But this is generally what he's talking about here. Okay, so let's go to the next one, which is chapter 9. Let's see what we've got here. Just taking a note of what we've got. Okay, let's go actually to chapter 10, because this will be something that will actually be really helpful for you. Is there someone who would like to read this? This will be the last one for today. Yes, ma'am. It's working.
The perfectly enlightened one prohibits monks from boasting about a non-existence of state of further man in oneself. Whatever monk should boast, with reference to himself, of a state of further man, attainment of jhanas, or stage of enlightenment, sufficient noble wisdom and insight, though not knowing it fully and saying, this I know, this I see, this if later on he being prized or not being prized, fallen, should aspire to be purified, and should say, Your Venerable Sir, I said that I know what I do not know, say what I do not say. I spoke idly, falsely with conceit apart from the undue estimate of himself. He also is one who is defeated. He is not in communion.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So what the Buddha is talking about here is that it would be unwise to declare to anybody else what your attainments are or your stage of enlightenment, that this would be boastful, this would be conceited. So going around and claiming that you're in any particular jhana, or claiming that you've attained any particular stage of enlightenment, or even claiming any certain wisdom, that you're being boastful or conceited towards others, this would be very unwise, because as you're conceited, as you have ego, other people are going to push you away, and they're going to reject you because they don't appreciate the arrogance and the conceit. Putting yourself above people and looking down on others, this is very unwise. So as the Buddha is teaching people how to get to this enlightened mental state where your mind's becoming more peaceful and more joyful, you're experiencing more and more concentration, the ego can still be in place because you haven't fully eradicated this from the mind. So as one's moving closer and closer to enlightenment, you can experience where you're experiencing a certain amount of peace and joy, but there's still that conceit, there's still that ego in there. And you got to get rid of that, because it's like a tenant who never pays rent, that it's not giving you any benefit, but it keeps figuring out a way to stick around. You've got to actively work to dissolve the ego and eliminate it. And one of those things that you would do is ensure that you're not claiming any kind of attainments that you've attained in terms of the jhanas, which are these preliminary phases that are experienced prior to the first stage of enlightenment, or not claiming one of the stages of enlightenment. Now, if you have a teacher that you're working with closely, you might talk with that teacher occasionally saying, hey, I think I'm in the first stage of enlightenment, or I think I've attained the third jhana, or something like this. And now on a personal level, that teacher is then helping you to be able to discern whether or not you've attained that or not. Because these stages of enlightenment and these attainments, they're there to help you plot your course and your personal growth on the path to enlightenment. So you're going to need to know what these attainments are and what these stages of enlightenment are, so that you can gradually make your way to enlightenment. And having a conversation with your teacher of where you think you might be could potentially be helpful. But that's very different than going out into the community and being boastful or arrogant about what you think you know, or what attainment you think you've attained, or any stages of enlightenment. One of the things that I share with people is one of the best ways to know that somebody's not enlightened is they will tell you that they're enlightened. So if you're around people who are claiming their attainments, they're claiming their stages of enlightenment, they're claiming certain wisdom that they understand, this is all unwise. And right away you can know that this is conceit, and this is boastfulness, and this is arrogance. And oftentimes what you'll see when someone's doing that is other people will kind of push them aside and reject them, because they're not interested in spending time with an individual who's arrogant and boastful. So the Buddha's guiding you wisely to be humble. And you'll see this in other parts of his teachings as well. Here he's just relating it specifically about talking about attainments and talking about things that you otherwise don't know. But you can relate this to all parts of your life. That when you're in your business life, when you're in your personal life, you're not interested in not only being boastful about any attainments on the path to enlightenment, but you're not interested in being boastful or arrogant and conceited about anything in your life, regardless of what the topic is. Being humble is where you'll experience the best results in your life. Any questions on this? Okay, so what I'm going to do then is just end class here by thanking all of you guys for joining. This is our Pali Canon and English study group. This is a study group that students oftentimes move into after having studied a foundational program or foundational course with me, because this will help to really fill in the framework as you're learning in our various programs that we have to really build a foundation and a framework. You can then move into a program like this will really help fill out all your different aspects of the path to enlightenment, studying with the original original words of the Buddha. If this is the first time you've been studying with me, either here or online, this might be a little bit kind of far for you in terms of what you're studying, because this is volume 12. And usually by the time somebody's gotten here, they've been studying with me for a good 2 years or more by the time they get to this point. So if you're just starting out and you're like, whoa, this stuff is kind of pretty far beyond where I am kind of currently at in my practice, that's understandable. There's programs on Sunday and Wednesday that are foundational programs. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock, I'm going to be teaching a class on the Eightfold Path, which is the core central teaching of the Buddha. I'm going to be teaching the mental discipline section. So that's ideal for somebody who's just starting out on the path to enlightenment. On Wednesday, I'm going to be teaching meditation and opening up to any and all questions that students have. In about 10 days from now, I'm going to be starting a course on harmony in relationships. This is really wonderful for students, and you can attend here at the temple or you can attend online. All these foundational programs are where students will oftentimes really get started in developing their practice. But then from time to time, there's students who come in here and they didn't necessarily know that the Pali Canon English study group was such that you would benefit the most if you had a foundation before learning it. And I try to relate these teachings in such a way that even if this is your first time learning the teachings of the Buddha, you can gain some kind of benefit out of our time together today. So perhaps you've gained some benefit in learning the teachings of the Buddha today. But just understand that you might decide to look at one of those foundational programs to really build up a foundation, as you then might decide to study more deeply with the original words of the Buddha. So you're always welcome to learn either here at the temple or online, and there's various courses and programs and retreats to be able to help you. So if you'd like information on that, you can see our website, you can see our bulletin board here, you can come and talk to me and I'll be able to help you. So thank you all for your interest to learn the teachings of the Buddha. Perhaps we'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Sawadee krap. Sawadee krap.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.